Let's pick things up there with tonight's political insider. Joining me, Ben Kamisar, national political reporter for The Hill. Ben, let's start with the non-compete agreement between Senator Ted Cruz and Governor John Kasich. Kasich wants to clear a path for Cruz in Indiana. Cruz is doing the same for Kasich in Oregon and New Mexico. What's the end game here? Is it too little, too late?
No, it's one of those you go this way, I'll go that way things. You know, they're both, John Kasich and Ted Cruz have the same goal, and that goal is to get to a contested convention. They're both mathematically unable to lock up the nomination before a contested convention. So their thought process is, you know, for Trump, he has to hit about 60% of the delegates that are remaining in order to avoid a contested convention. That's a much higher clip than he's already been getting. So the hope is that, you know, clear the field for John Kasich in states like Oregon and New Mexico, and clear the field for Ted Cruz in Indiana. The hope there being that the anti-Donald Trump forces sort of coalesce and help try to keep Donald Trump's delegate haul down. Certainly not too little, too late, especially since it's any delegates that they can steal, good for both Cruz and Kasich. But that said, Kasich has already started back away from this a little bit today, saying that, you know, he hopes that his supporters will vote for him in Indiana. So a little bit of conflicting messages.
Yeah, his ego, you know, he sees things differently than everybody, but then that's all politicians do, I guess. Trump added a former Chris Christie staffer to his team. Tell me more about Ken McKay.
Yeah, McKay is one of these, it's a typical hire that you've seen of this sort of new Trump enterprise. The goal here is, you know, he had been doing very well in the elections, but now that the goal has sort of shifted away from the elections really to the delegate inside baseball game, he needs more of these party loyalists that know how to play the rules of this game. So Ted Cruz has really excelled at getting these local leaders and local level delegates and state level delegates that are all aligned to him onto the floor of the convention. Trump hasn't done as well. So this is just another one of these hires that's meant at sort of playing the inside baseball game. McKay used to work for the RNC, used to work for the Republican Governor Association. Most recently was Chris Christie's campaign manager. So all of that is a pretty good resume if you're trying to play that inside game.
Speaking of which, we don't see or hear much of Chris Christie anymore, do we?
No, he hasn't been too much on the trail. Was obviously a big face and a big name for Trump when he got there. But don't forget, Trump's certainly happy to do most of this himself, and he's relying on some of these local level endorsements as well. He's got an event coming up in Indiana with Bobby Knight, so he's got some other big names he can toss around too.
Now, on the left, polls predict a Hillary Clinton sweep. Will that close the door on the Sanders campaign, because he's vowed to stay in all the way to the Democratic convention?
Probably won't close the door any more than just underscore what the math has already shown us, that Sanders basically needs a miracle if he's going to walk out of here as the Democratic nominee. Certainly, he's won a bunch of states and won a bunch of votes, but frankly, it's all about the delegates, same on the Republican side. And Hillary Clinton has a substantial lead in the delegates, the pledged delegates, more than 200, and that lead's likely to grow after these elections. So really, for Sanders, he needs to woo over these super delegates, and if Clinton continues to win elections, it's a tougher sell for Sanders in the only avenue that he has left, which is the superdelegates.
Now, the general election picture could be a little more clear late Tuesday night. There are some significant trouble signs for the GOP. Exhibit A, this exchange between conservative billionaire Charles Koch and Jonathan Karl of ABC News.
You think Bill Clinton was a better president than George W. Bush?
Well, in some ways. In other ways, I mean, he wasn't an exemplar.
Yeah.
But as far as the growth of government, the increase in spending, it was 2.5 times under Bush that it was under Clinton.
So is it possible another Clinton could be better than another Republican
it's
the next
possible.
time around?
It's possible.
You couldn't see yourself supporting Hillary Clinton, could you?
Well, we would have to believe her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric.
Now, Ben, this is incredible. The Koch brothers have donated $1 million to conservative candidates. What's going on here?
I mean, this is a major Republican power broker drawing a line in the sand. Certainly what he's suggesting here, and what a lot of Republicans have said, is that they're concerned about what happens to the party, what happens to the direction of the country under Donald Trump presidency. And this is just another one of those major players in the Republican Party coming out and sort of expressing their concerns. I mean, certainly this election has brought up a lot of divisions on both sides of the party. And this, you know, when you take a look at the Republicans, this is another one of those ways that it might be tough for Republicans to sort of have their kumbaya moment and come back together if Donald Trump does, in fact, win the nomination.
All right, before you go, what should our viewers watch for tomorrow night? Are there any sleeper storylines on the primary campaign trail?
Well, right now it's really all about the margin. We know that Donald Trump's going to win most, if not all. We know that Hillary Clinton's going to win most, if not all. But on the Republican side, it's really going to see if this sort of Kasich, Cruz style of politicking, certainly the Indiana primaries until next week, but sort of that style of politicking, just trying to keep the margin down to Donald Trump and trying to stop him from getting delegates. If that's successful, if he comes out and scores some huge victories on Tuesday, that's going to make it much easier for him to avoid a contested convention. But that said, if they're able to keep the margins close, then it makes it much harder. And on the opposite side, it's the same thing. Hillary Clinton certainly wants to knock up as much of a lead in these primaries as she can, but as long as Bernie Sanders doesn't blow her out in a ton of primaries, it's going to be tough for him to do much on tomorrow night.
It's all about the numbers. Ben Kamisar, national political reporter for The Hill. Thanks, Ben.
Of course.